Hello and welcome to the 9th day of Ravenloft Fright Nights. My name is Locke, my pronouns are they, he, and I will be your wereraven today. And you guys already know what I'm about to do because I'm standing and my chair is positioned in a very particular place. Like a video that I've done before. So why don't I just drop the pretenses and get my little helper out here again. Let's get dear Count Strahd von Zarevich to join me on stage today. Wahoo. So as you could probably tell by the title, as we are going through the mist today, I'm doing something that it's been a long time coming for me to give you guys some, hold on. I have my pointer again. 5 quick tips to run Curse of Strahd for this spooky season celebration. So we're gonna go over some things very quickly, give you a good idea of some things to keep in mind that I do to run my games, and my credentials. I don't know why I'm using this like a microphone, but this is what we're doing now. My credentials. Well, obviously, this is a tabletop RPG channel. We do gaming sometimes too, but mostly tabletop. With a particular bias, shall we say, towards Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft. I am currently running 5 Curse of Strahd games professionally. Kinda 6, technically, probably by the time this comes out. So I do this a lot, and I'm fairly confident that I'm at least decent at what I do. Credentials laid out there. Let us get into it. Also, even though this is like tips for DMs on how to run Curse of Strahd, things to keep in mind, I'm not going to be going into any spoilers, so this isn't going to be anything that players need to look away from if you want to watch, but might be more beneficial towards DMs, but also players might learn something that would give them better insight of like how to play their character to get more out of the campaign. But also that's a video for another day. All right, let's go with quick tip number 5. Let Strahd play. So this first one with my dear man here is probably pretty obvious. It is pretty explicitly stated within the Curse of Strahd 5e module, in which that Strahd is not a passive antagonist. He's not a BBG that you hear about and know that you're gonna fight at the end, but you don't actually see or interact with until the end game. That's not who this man is at all. He needs too much attention, and you need to keep that in mind. I always encourage Curse of Strahd DMs to not be afraid to bring Strahd in early and often. For example, I've had him interact with parties as low level as, I think level 2, actually. 2 or 3, which I know when you're looking at CR ratings and whatever, those barely count for anything in my mind. But you don't think about throwing the big bad at that low level of a party. But I think it's important to have him show up and to start playing the game. It's a game for him. He's bored. The whole reason parties get lured into Barovia is because this man wants to be entertained and is also like looking for the things that we know that he's looking for, right? So that's why he brings more people in as well. So him showing up early to introduce himself, to play the role of Count, especially maybe even before anyone can tell them that like he's a bad guy, like to be wary of him, that people live in fear of the land's ruler, right? Have him show up. But also, if you have a setup to where, like, you don't get to play that long con game, have him show up and fuck the party up, dude. I don't know why I said it like that. But he wants to establish his dominance, his power. So showing up and messing with the party, downing them, kick them while they're down, basically, after being trapped inside a demi-plane of dread. Like, that is so important to have happen early and then have it continuously happen throughout the campaign. I'm not saying every session, because your party needs to have a break, and that leads to a bad campaign setup, like the flow, the pacing of it. You don't want it to turn into torture porn. I want to never have to say that again, but we're on YouTube. And if you turn it into where it's just getting beat down again and again every session, people get numb to it, it makes the stakes not feel so high, like, I don't know, it's not a good time. So have him show up often, but not so often that it gets numbing. So, and not every encounter with him has to be combat. Some of it can just be him toying mentally with people outside of the dinner. Outside of the dinner! I've yapped too long about one point when I said that these were going to be quick. So let's move on to number 4, shall we? If you're not new to the channel, you're not surprised by the next one, which is move the timeline around. So the Curse of Strahd 5e timeline, which obviously probably takes inspiration from previous edition lore, it doesn't have to stay static. You can move the pieces around however you want in order to have a more fulfilling story for your party. So if your PCs have given you ways to connect them to certain parts of the world, but you're struggling to figure out how to quite make it work, sometimes just moving when the events happen solves all of your problems. So never be afraid to do that. I forgot to turn off my air conditioner. 1 second. I'm back. Can you tell that I am panicking about finishing the rest of Ravenloft Fright Nights? Move the timeline. Any of the events in the past can be moved up or back. You could have it set in a different place. You could have something happening currently, like Berez. The destruction of Berez could happen throughout your campaign rather than it being something that happened in the not-so-distant past. If that would be more interesting for your party to explore having that happen, or to witness Strahd's power and his control over the land, because, you know, he is the ancient, he is the land, and sometimes getting to see that up front is good and kind of goes hand in hand with tip number 5. Another example of moving the timeline around that I've done is Argynvostholt. I'm not going to spoil it here, but I had it at a different point in the timeline for so long that I forgot where it technically sits. I know where it sits now, but there was like a good couple years where I just totally forgot that what I've done is not the canon, which I think is kind of funny. But like, that's another example. If you can hear a cat in the background, the orange fluff ball has been obsessed with me today, and I don't know what I've done to deserve this. And he's very upset that I'm not letting him in. It is actively trying to turn the doorknob, and it sounds terrifying. It sounds like someone's trying to break into my room right now, and I'm trying so hard to be chill. Tip number 3. Hang on to long-term consequences. Curse of Strahd is a campaign of moral dilemmas, where you're going to have to make tough choices between 2 not-so-great outcomes. So no matter what, you're a little bit fucked. And that's part of the fun, right? But sometimes the consequences are not so immediate. You don't know exactly what it is that you've done, which might mean that you are convinced that you made the best decision you could and actually nothing went wrong. Or you think that, like, something that you did while in town isn't gonna, like, change the entire dynamic of the way that the town works. I'm talking about Vallaki. And then you leave, and then you come back, and it's a completely different political structure. And it could be like multiple days in game, but also for real life, that could be multiple months, you know, of real time passing by. I really want to encourage you to never forget to hang on to long-term consequences. Let things stew. Let them fester. Let them be big reveals so that when you finally get to reveal it, however long later, you get the best reactions out of your party of like, oh my god, that mattered. Best example I can give of this is I sat on something for a year of real life time. I had to sit, and I had to wait. And I sat, and I waited. And I waited, and I sat. And then a year passed after basically immediate consequences. The sorcerer PC was getting visits in their dreams from a dark power, and the dark power told them one thing. Don't do this one thing. And without knowing, that sorcerer immediately went and told the ranger lock, whose patron they communicated to, everything that was said, and that was the one thing the dark power asked, was to not communicate with the patron. But no one knew that the patron was the same entity that the dark power was asking to not be communicated with, and the sorcerer didn't know to like not tell the ranger lock, you know what I mean. It was a beautiful setup of dominoes falling in just like the perfect disaster pattern, but I didn't get to reveal the fact that this dark power essentially got doxxed for a year in real time, because then the sorcerer never went back to sleep. So I didn't get to reveal the immediate bad decision and the consequences of it for a year in real time, but getting to see the sorcerer player's face, as well as everyone else at the table. Getting to see their face when they realized why what I was describing was happening before I even directly got to say it. Peak. Peak DM moment. So, don't be afraid. I'm just accepting that that's going to be crooked. Don't be afraid to let things linger, to play the long game, because Curse of Strahd is also a gothic horror story. Gothic horror takes time to burn. You have to let the candle be lit and then let it will down all the wax before you're out and you're in the dark. And that's a good way to always remember how gothic horror story consequences can come to pass. I made that up on the fly, and I feel pretty smart about it. I would appreciate applause in the comments below. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Alright, let's move on to quick tip number 2. Utilize the brides. Something that I've learned over my multiple years of experience of running this campaign is that the brides need to be more active. I think a big mistake that a lot of people have is leaving the brides to only exist within Castle Ravenloft. So if the party gets lured there or otherwise has to go there to get one of the items in the fetch crest, or the dinner, or of course the endgame battle, right? Saving the brides only for existing within the castle makes them feel pointless. Makes them just feel like objects that Strahd possesses, which technically is correct, but also doesn't give them like nuances and character development, and just it leads to very flat characterizations of some of the most important women NPCs present in the module, and that's not a good thing. So remembering to keep the brides in mind as extensions of Strahd's cruelty, of representation of how he sinks his fangs into them, of course, but also into Barovians, why so many people are loyal and don't see what's wrong and are willing to enact his will and obey his every word. You get to see that the most throughout the brides because they've literally married him and were turned into vampire spawn, or higher vampires, because I think they should have more powers than the spawn typically gets. Tea break, 1 second. My throat was parched. So, also kind of hand in hand with letting Strahd play, let the brides play. Let them go out into the world and also toy with the party. Let them be intrigued. Let them take note of whatever PC that maybe Strahd is most drawn to because he sees potential in them either joining the court or becoming the heir, that sort of thing, because they want what Strahd wants. So they'll do whatever it is to try to help him achieve his goals, right? So not having them present and helping him doesn't make sense to me. Doesn't make sense to me from a story perspective. So, include the brides. Thank me later. It's a really fun time. Yet another aspect that you can include early on and often that kind of shows the party at lower levels that they are out of their depth and really need to come together and figure out their differences to be able to move forward together to survive this world. Also, the brides are hot. Let the brides be hot outside of the big fancy castle. They need to serve and they need to eat. So feed them. And feed them well. Let's get to our final quick tip, our number 1. Ba-dum-bum-bum. Give the NPCs connections. Give them meaningful connections. And I do mean outside of what the module explicitly states. So Irina and Ismark being sister and brother. That's the obvious one, right? You're set up with that pretty early on, and it says it explicitly that is what they are to each other. However, in the village of Barovia, you know who else they would know? Doru. Gertruda. Obviously Mad Mary. Give them relationships to each other. Periwinkle and Bildrith, they should have active opinions of each other who they are surrounded by. But also, again, using Ismark and Irina, they are a noble family. Sometimes I think it's hard to remember that because of how run down and in fear the village is, to where like the political structure of that particular settlement feels a little lost to just trying to survive. But they are still technically nobles. And the head of the village, so Kolion Indirovich, the old burgomaster, should have had a relationship with, at the very least, burgomaster of Valaki, Vargas Valakovich. They should have some sort of existing relationship. I'm leaving Kresk out because they like to stay within their stone walls and don't want to talk to anyone. Understandable. But that might leave them out of like the political alignments and communication. Which means that Ismark, who would be inheriting the role of burgomaster, should also know the nobles of Valaki. Should have some sort of understanding of who they are. Especially maybe Viktor Vlakovich, because they might be around the same age depending on how you want to run it. Two heirs to the title of being, the ruler, or ruler's not the right word considering he probably wouldn't like that, the leader of these settlements, right? So give Victor and Ismark a relationship. Maybe they correspond and talk about the pressures of what they're going to be expected to do. Maybe Ismark has confided in what it feels like to be called the Lesser all the time to Viktor Valakovich, and he can relate to that because he's also not understood and is kind of seen as irresponsible with his magic. So little things like that. The other one that I really like doing is thinking about the children. Arabelle and Bray, they're around the same age. Why wouldn't they be friends? Why wouldn't they be friends? I just think that makes sense. Especially because the Vistani camp that Arabelle is from is literally just like right outside of Valaki. So why not give that connection? But yeah, this is a point that I could go on about a lot, but I don't want this video to be forever long, so maybe it could be a video all on its own. But the more that you interconnect the people of Barovia, in my experience, the more real the world feels, and it gives the party something to fight for. Because obviously a big motivation for a party to follow the Troika reading, to try to defeat Strahd, obviously from a meta sense, is because that's the campaign that you signed up for, right? But from an in-universe standpoint, could just be because they want to escape, but as they go throughout Barovia, they can see these people and how the suffering and how the darkness and how the oppression has affected the way they move throughout the world. And that can give them ways to connect with people and not only want to do this for themselves, but for others, which also leads to them actually connecting with the NPCs and making allies out of them, and then having more help going into end game. And giving NPCs relationships, meaningful relationships, either why they're enemies, why they're friends, why they're lovers, why they've been scorned by someone. Like, making that feel real and dramatic fits gothic horror, obviously, but also making it feel real just puts more at stake. So make them feel as real as possible, and a great way to start doing that is by doing a big red string conspiracy board of connections of how NPCs know each other from different settlements, within the same settlement, that sort of thing. So that's my last tip, because I think that is one of the most important things that I have done that has made my parties enjoy my table, my campaign, so much. One last honorable mention tip. Don't play into the racism of the module. The Vistani shouldn't be treated that way, and I think really taking the time to consider what you want to do with the Vistani and how you want to utilize their story throughout the campaign is important to do as you're prepping and also continuously running Curse of Strahd. Not all Vistani should be evil, so just take that out, dude. Don't do the racist stuff. There's so many ways to run it to make it more interesting and be more inclusive without having to go into the racism of it all, because you don't need to tell that to tell a good horror story. And if you can't figure out a way around it, all I'm gonna say is get more creative. But yeah, I didn't mean to hit him. But yeah, I think that is going to do it for my 5 quick tips on how to run Curse of Strahd. Just some things to keep in mind as you are going through this adventure with your party. I didn't go super in depth with any of them because I wanted this to stay short within the confines of what has made a Ravenloft Fright Nights video. But if there's anything that you guys want me to expound upon about what I've done in particular, or more explanation on any of these tips, or generally just advice on how to run Curse of Strahd, let me know. I can make those videos in the future. But as we are getting on out of the mist for this episode, I hope that you found this helpful. So shoo! Take what you've learned here today and tell your wonderful gothic horror stories. I can't wait to hear about it. So thank you for joining me for this 9th installment of Ravenloft Fright Nights. We are almost at the end here now. We're in the final home stretch. So if you haven't subscribed and you want to see the rest of what's coming, please do so. Hit that like button because it lets me know that you've been enjoying this series and will give me a good idea of if I should do this next year. I've enjoyed it, so I'm hoping that you guys are liking it as well. As of recording this, quite a few have come out, and they've done really well, so I'm assuming that this will be wanted next year as well. But thank you all for watching. I really appreciate your time and attention, and I will see you guys next time. You have to say goodbye. Okay? They aren't gonna like you if you don't say goodbye. You can be personable. Come on, you were noble.